Greetings, YouTube. I thought I'd do a review of The Raven with my familiar on my shoulder. Let's see if she stays here for the entire video. My wife and I got a chance to look at the 2012 film The Raven, starring John Cusack. And my wife's always been a fan of Poe, and I'm always kind of been a fan of John Cusack, even from his youngest days to the present. Though I will admit he has made a lot of questionable casting choices over the years. Apparently, Mandarin's decided to be a little more interactive today. This is going to be full of spoilers, so be aware of that. This is a fictionalized account of the last days of Edgar Allan Poe's life. Very fictionalized, as in pure and utter fantasy. And the basic premise, come on, up or down, kitten, make your choice. Up or down, make a choice. Up or down? No, you're just going to be a pain in the butt. All right. The basic premise here is that there's a serial killer who is taunting Poe by copying his horror tales and making them real. So he's actually murdering people based on the films, not the film, but the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. This draws him in, of course, puts him under suspicion, but draws him into the case. And I actually don't know how much they had for a police department detective squad in 1849. I really don't. I haven't done any research in that regard. I don't know if they're as well organized in the real life as they were in this film, but they weren't all that badly organized. It seemed a whole lot like modern detectives in many ways. And the first crime is dealing, and the clue was a tricked window with a special lock on it. And that's pretty simple to pull off. A clever person with just simple hand tools could accomplish what the killer did in that setting. Copying the story, making a trick window, quite possible to do. The second murder was someone that was killed with a pendulum from The Pit and the Pendulum. Strap a man to a table, pendulum slowly comes down, and actually not that slowly. It dropped down each swing like a good 3 inches or 4 inches. I always imagine the pendulum coming down like, a quarter of an inch or something, or even less. Really drag it out and make the person terrified and prolong their death. And they find the corpse, and they identify the corpse, and then they bring in Poe to look at the corpse, and it doesn't occur to anyone in the film that to build a giant pendulum, with a swinging arc wider than the room I'm in, maybe as wide as my entire house, like 20 feet, is a monumental task, both monetarily and from an engineering standpoint. It would have taken at least a dozen people to put that pendulum into that room. And you have to pay them all. And then I guess you'd have to kill them all to keep it secret. But the person that owned the building didn't know this at all. Nobody thought it weird when they're bringing huge pieces of machinery in and a giant blade, and I'm just like, wow. So we're supposed to believe that this guy perfectly emulated The Pit and the Pendulum, but nobody noticed them building a giant pendulum. And my wife and I are just kind of looking at each other like, wow. And I'm like, well, I know why this didn't do very well in the theater. And she turned to me and she said, why, honey? Why? She said, because it's bad. And I said, yes, because it's bad. It was very uneven. John Cusack chewed up scenery. He earned his money. I don't know how much he got paid, man, but he chewed it up like a nobody's business. They made Poe look worse than I think he was in real life. He was depressed. He was an alcoholic, a drug addict. broke, and lived through a series of monumental tragedies. An actual biopic of his life would be slowly paced, have no excitement in it, be very depressing, as everything he loved slipped away, and then he's found wandering in someone else's clothes, mumbling about someone named Reynolds in real life, and then he dies. And then a man who hated him basically took over his entire estate, said he was the executor. And then, of course, all the information about Poe's death, including his death certificate, were lost over time. Yay! So I'm not sure what they were trying to do with this film. There was points when it was like, hey, look it, they threw a little Sleepy Hollow in there, a little sprinkling of literary references in the film for no apparent good reason. Um, so yeah, both my wife and I were monumentally disappointed by this film. I'm glad I only paid $4 for it at a thrift shop. It was more than I normally pay, but I know my wife is a fan of Poe and I'm a fan of John Cusack, and I thought, okay, just because people have said bad things, we've watched films in the past where people said bad things about them, and we've still enjoyed them. We should have listened. This is not a good film. It makes no sense. It does not cleave to the reality in any way, shape, or form, and it has so many logical holes in it. You could float the QE2 through it. Just amazing. I would love to hear what other people have to say about this film. Did you enjoy it? Did you ignore the fact that there was a giant pendulum in a place then no one else ever knew about it? Did that one just slide past you? Because it didn't slide past me. I'm a bit of a tinkerer and crafter, and I know a little bit about engineering, enough to know how difficult it would be to build that, and the amount of work required to achieve that. Yeah. So I'm going to chalk this one up as another bad casting decision made by John Cusack.